The plate of roasted venison sat untouched before her, steam rising in lazy spirals, and Elias Zimmerman watched the orc woman shift uncomfortably on the wooden bench across from him, her amber eyes flicking between the food and the door as if calculating which escape route would prove faster. He had invited her into his home after finding her collapsed near his wheat field 3 days ago, dehydrated and bearing wounds that spoke of a brutal fight. And in all that time, she had accepted only water, refusing every meal he offered until her ribs had begun to show through her green skin. "You need to eat," Elias said, keeping his voice gentle despite the frustration building in his chest. "I know you don't trust me, but starving yourself won't help you heal." The orc woman, who had finally told him her name was Krazka after 2 days of stubborn silence, shook her head with a firmness that made her dark braids swing across her muscular shoulders. "I cannot or will not, both." She folded her arms across her chest, and even weakened as she was, the gesture carried an unmistakable authority. "My kind eats with the leader. You sit at the head of this table, you serve yourself first, you lead this household. I will not dishonor my people's ways even here." Elias blinked, processing her words while the evening light slanted through his small kitchen windows, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. He had heard stories about orcs his entire life, growing up on this frontier homestead, where the border between human and orc territories blurred like watercolors in rain. Most of those stories painted orcs as mindless brutes who took what they wanted and killed without thought. None of them had mentioned anything about elaborate eating customs or concerns about honor. "You want me to eat first?" he asked slowly. "You must eat first. You are the leader here. When the leader eats, the clan may eat. That is our way." Krazka's voice softened slightly, though her posture remained rigid. "I know humans do not follow such traditions. I know you think it foolish, but it is what I am." Elias looked down at his own plate, identical to hers, laden with venison, roasted carrots from his garden, and thick slices of bread he had baked that morning. The idea that she had been starving herself not out of mistrust, but out of some cultural protocol struck him as both absurd and strangely touching. He picked up his fork. "Then I'll eat first," he said simply, cutting into the venison and taking a deliberate bite. The meat was tender, seasoned with herbs from the small garden his mother had planted before she died, and he chewed slowly while Krazka watched him with an intensity that made him self-conscious. He swallowed, took another bite, and then gestured to her plate. "Now you." For a moment she did not move, and Elias wondered if he had somehow gotten it wrong, if there was some other ritual step he was supposed to perform. Then Krazka reached for her own fork with a hand that trembled slightly, and he realized the trembling came not from hesitation but from hunger. She ate with careful dignity despite her obvious need, cutting small pieces and chewing thoroughly, but he could see the relief in the way her shoulders gradually relaxed. They ate in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the clink of utensils and the crackle of the fire in the hearth. Elias found himself studying her when she was focused on her food, noting details he had been too busy with basic medical care to properly observe before. Her skin was a deep forest green that seemed to shift in the firelight, and her tusks were smaller than he had expected, delicate even, curving up from her lower jaw in a way that somehow enhanced rather than detracted from the striking angles of her face. Scars marked her arms, and one ran along her collarbone, disappearing beneath the oversized shirt he had loaned her after cutting away her bloodied armor. "How did you end up on my land?" Elias asked, when she had eaten half her plate and some color had returned to her features. "Those wounds looked like they came from weapons, not animals." Krazka set down her fork, and for a moment he thought she would retreat back into silence. Then she spoke, her voice low and measured. I was cast out. My clan learned that I had helped human travelers who were lost in the mountains. I gave them food and showed them the safe path through the passes. When my chieftain discovered this, he said I had betrayed our people, that I had gone soft. He challenged me to combat to reclaim my honor. She touched the scar on her collarbone absently. I fought well, but I would not kill him. So I lost and I was exiled. You were punished for showing mercy. Elias felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and sudden. I was punished for helping humans. My people have long memories, Elias Zimmerman. We remember the wars, the massacres, the villages burned. Many in my clan lost family to human blades. They see any kindness to your kind as treason. Krazka met his eyes directly, and he saw pain there beneath her stoic expression. I do not blame them for their hatred, but I could not let those travelers die when I had the power to help them. Perhaps I am weak, as my chieftain said. You're not weak, Elias said firmly. You're decent. There's a difference. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a scoff, he could not tell which. Decency is a luxury when your people are hunted, but I appreciate your words. She returned to her food, and Elias sensed that was all she wanted to say on the matter for now. Over the following days, a rhythm developed between them. Each morning Elias would prepare breakfast, sit at the head of his small table, and take the first bite before Krazka would allow herself to eat. She insisted on helping with work around the homestead, despite still recovering from her injuries, and he found her to be astonishingly strong even in a weakened state. She could carry water buckets that would have required him to make 2 trips, and she repaired a section of his fence that had been listing to one side for months with an efficiency that left him feeling somewhat inadequate. You are a good farmer, Krazka observed one afternoon as they worked together to weed the vegetable garden, the late summer sun beating down on their backs. Your land is well kept. You work hard. My father taught me, Elias replied, pulling up a stubborn dandelion root. He homesteaded this land 40 years ago, built everything from nothing. When he died 5 years back, I promised I would keep it running. Some days are easier than others. You live alone. My mother died 3 years ago. Fever took her one winter, and there was nothing I could do. The old grief was a dull ache now rather than a sharp pain, but it still hurt to remember. I had a younger sister, but she married a man from the nearest town and moved away. She writes sometimes. Mostly I have the land and the work, and that's enough. Krazka was quiet for a long moment, her hands stilling in the dirt. Loneliness is a heavy burden. Yes, Elias agreed softly. It is. They worked side by side until the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. When they returned to the house, Elias noticed that Krazka moved with less stiffness than she had that morning, her wounds finally beginning to properly heal. She had been with him for nearly 2 weeks now, and he realized with some surprise that he had grown accustomed to her presence, to having someone to talk to over meals, to hearing footsteps other than his own echo through the small house. That evening after they had eaten, another meal begun by his ritual first bite, Krazka stood and began to clear the table without being asked. Elias moved to help her, and their hands brushed as they both reached for the same plate. The contact was brief, but he felt a jolt of something he could not quite name travel up his arm. Krazka pulled back quickly, her eyes wide, and he saw a flush darken her green cheeks. I should not stay much longer, she said abruptly, turning away to scrape plates into the scrap bucket for his chickens. You have been generous, but I am imposing on your hospitality. You're not imposing, Elias said, and he meant it more than he probably should. Where would you go? You said yourself you were cast out. There are other orc clans to the north, beyond the mountain passes. Some are more tolerant, or so I have heard. I could seek shelter there. But her voice lacked conviction, and Elias suspected she knew as well as he did that appearing as an exile from another clan would make her suspect anywhere she went. Or you could stay here, he offered, the words emerging before he had fully thought them through. At least through the winter. It comes early this far north, and you don't want to be caught in the mountains when the snows start. You could help me with the harvest, and I could use an extra pair of hands when it's time to prepare the house for the cold months. Krazka turned to face him, her expression unreadable. Why would you do this? You barely know me. For all you know, I could be the savage brute your people believe all orcs to be. But you're not, Elias said simply. You're someone who was cast out for showing mercy to strangers. You're someone who refuses to eat until the proper customs are observed, even when you're starving. You're someone who works hard and asks for nothing. He paused, then added more quietly, and I think maybe you're someone who could use a place to belong, same as me. He watched emotions flicker across her face too quickly for him to identify them all. Finally, she nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Through the winter, then, I will earn my keep. I know you will, Elias said, and felt something in his chest ease that he had not realized was tight. The harvest season consumed them both over the next month. Elias's wheat fields were not vast, nothing compared to the great farming estates in the southern provinces, but they still required intense labor to bring in before the first frost. Krazka proved to be an invaluable partner, her strength allowing her to swing a scythe for hours without tiring, and her attention to detail meant that little grain was wasted. They worked from dawn until dusk, falling into bed exhausted each night with barely energy for conversation. But Elias found himself noticing small things. The way Krazka would hum tunelessly while she worked, a sound that was not quite melody, but somehow pleasant anyway. The way she would sometimes stop and tilt her face toward the sun as if soaking in its warmth. The way she laughed, rare but genuine, when one of his chickens managed to escape its coop and led them on a ridiculous chase around the yard. One evening after a particularly long day, they sat on the porch steps watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, too tired to bother going inside just yet. The air had taken on the crisp edge of approaching autumn, and Elias could smell the distant promise of frost on the wind. "Tell me about orc customs," he said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Why is it so important that the leader eats first?" Krazka considered the question, her gaze fixed on the emerging constellations. Orcs are clan creatures. We survive through loyalty to the group, through knowing our place in the hierarchy. The leader eats first because the leader bears the weight of responsibility for all. They taste the food first in case it is poisoned. They eat first to show strength, to prove they are fit to lead. And when the clan eats together after the leader has eaten, it is a reminder that we are all bound together, that we all rely on each other. She glanced at him. Your human families eat together, but everyone starts at once, yes. There is no order. Usually, Elias confirmed. Though I suppose in formal settings, in noble houses, there might be more protocol. But for common folk like me, we just eat when the food is ready. It must be strange, having no clear leader in a household. I suppose my father was the leader when he was alive in his way. He made the big decisions, decided when to plant and harvest, managed the money. But my mother had her own authority too. She ran the house, decided what we ate, taught us our letters. It was more of a partnership than a hierarchy. Elias thought about his parents, about the way they had moved through life as a team, each respecting the other's domain. I think that's what I'd want if I ever married. A partner, not a subordinate. That sounds lonely, Krazka said softly. To lead alone with no one to follow. It sounds lonely to follow and never lead, Elias countered gently. She turned to look at him fully, and in the twilight her eyes seemed to glow slightly, a trick of the reflected starlight. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps there is loneliness in both ways if there is no one who understands you. They sat in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence than before, charged with something unspoken but present nonetheless. When they finally went inside, Elias lay awake for a long time, listening to the soft sounds of Krazka settling into the small storage room he had converted into a bedroom for her, and wondering why the thought of her leaving when winter ended made his chest feel hollow. The first snow came in early October, just a light dusting that melted by noon but served as a warning of what was to come. Elias and Krazka spent the following weeks preparing, checking the roof for leaks, stuffing cloth into gaps around the windows, stacking firewood under the covered area beside the house, until they had enough to last through even a brutal winter. They worked well together, having developed an easy coordination that required few words. But the ease of their working relationship only made Elias more aware of the tension that seemed to build between them during their quieter moments. The way he found himself watching her when she was not looking, memorizing the line of her jaw, and the way her pointed ears twitched slightly when she was concentrating. The way he could feel her gaze on him sometimes, heavy and considering, though she always looked away when he tried to meet her eyes. One evening in late October, as they sat before the fire after dinner, Krazka spoke suddenly into the silence. "I need to tell you something." Elias looked up from the harness he was mending, hearing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" "There are orcs who hunt exiles, hunters sent by the clans to ensure that those cast out do not reveal secrets or join enemy clans." She stared into the fire, her face troubled. "I did not think my clan cared enough about me to send hunters. I thought they would simply let me go and forget I existed. But I saw signs today when I was checking the northern fence line. Marks on trees, the kind hunters used to track their prey." Elias felt cold despite the warmth of the fire. "Are you certain?" "I am certain. They may not come for weeks yet. They may be tracking multiple exiles, and I am only one target among many, but they will come eventually." Krazka turned to face him, and her expression was fierce. "I will leave before they arrive. I will not bring that danger to your door. You have shown me kindness I did not deserve, and I will not repay that kindness by leading hunters to your home. No." The word came out harder than Elias intended, and Krazka blinked in surprise. He set aside the harness and leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "You're not leaving, not alone. If hunters come, we'll face them together. You do not understand what you are offering. These are trained warriors, Elias. They will kill anyone who stands between them and their target. I will not let you die for me. And I won't let you face them alone," Elias shot back. "This is my land, my home. I have every right to defend it and anyone under my roof. Besides," he added, trying for a lighter tone, "you said your people follow their leaders. Well, I'm the leader of this household, and I say you stay." Krazka stared at him for a long moment, and something in her expression shifted, softened. "You would risk your life for an orc exile, for me?" "Yes," Elias said simply, and realized he meant it with an intensity that surprised him. Somewhere over the past months, Krazka had stopped being merely a guest in his home and had become something more important, something he did not want to lose. "You're not just anyone, Krazka. You're my friend. And I don't abandon my friends." She looked away quickly, but not before he saw the shine of moisture in her eyes. "I have not had a friend in a long time, perhaps ever. My clan valued strength, not friendship." "Then your clan were fools," Elias said firmly. They prepared over the following days with quiet efficiency. Elias brought out his father's old sword, dusty from years of storage, and spent time each morning practicing the basic forms his father had taught him as a boy. He had never been a warrior, had never wanted to be, but he knew enough to defend himself if necessary. Krazka retrieved her weapons from where she had hidden them in the forest, a wickedly sharp hand axe and a long hunting knife, and he watched her practice with them, awed by the fluid grace of her movements despite her intimidating strength. "You're a trained warrior," he observed one morning, watching her run through a series of strikes that would have overwhelmed any opponent foolish enough to face her. "All orcs receive combat training from childhood. It is necessary for survival." Krazka finished her practice and turned to him, breathing only slightly harder than normal despite the intensity of her workout. "But I was never the strongest fighter in my clan. There were many better. That is why I knew I could not kill my chieftain when he challenged me. He had years more experience and he had no qualms about killing." "You chose mercy over victory," Elias said. "That takes a different kind of strength. Perhaps, or perhaps it simply proved I was not meant to be an orc." The bitterness in her voice cut at him. Elias crossed the distance between them and, acting on instinct more than thought, took her hand in his. Her skin was warm and slightly rough with calluses, and her fingers were longer than his. She looked down at their joined hands in surprise but did not pull away. "You are an orc," he said firmly. "But being an orc doesn't mean you have to be cruel. There's no honor in needless killing, no matter what your chieftain believed. You are exactly what you should be, Krazka. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." She met his eyes, and the vulnerability in her gaze made his heart ache. "How can you have such faith in me when you have known me for such a short time?" "Because I see you," Elias said softly. "I see how hard you work, how much you care about doing things right. I see your honor and your strength, and I see your kindness, even when you try to hide it behind warrior stoicism." Krazka's free hand came up to touch his face, her palm cupping his cheek with surprising gentleness despite her warrior's calluses. "You are unlike any human I have ever met, Elias Zimmerman." "Good," he managed, his voice rough. They stood frozen like that for a moment, her hand on his face, his hand holding hers, the morning sun warm on their backs. Then Krazka pulled away, but slowly, reluctantly, and he felt the absence of her touch like a physical loss. They did not speak of that moment afterward, but something had shifted between them, some boundary crossed. Elias caught himself finding excuses to stand close to her, to brush against her when they passed in the narrow kitchen, to let his hand linger when he passed her tools or dishes. And she did the same, he noticed, her fingers trailing across his shoulders when she walked past, her leg pressing against his when they sat at the table. Contact that could be dismissed as accidental, but happened too frequently to be anything but intentional. The hunters came on a cold November morning when frost painted the windows in delicate patterns, and their breath fogged the air. Elias was in the barn tending to his 2 cows when he heard Krazka call out a warning, her voice sharp and urgent. He grabbed the sword he had taken to keeping nearby and ran back toward the house. 3 orcs stood in his yard, all male, all larger than Krazka and bearing weapons that spoke of serious intent. They wore leather armor marked with symbols he did not recognize, and their green skin was several shades darker than Krazka's, almost black in places. The one in the center, who appeared to be the leader, held a massive war axe that looked like it could split a man in half with one blow. Krazka stood on the porch, her own weapons drawn, her body positioned protectively in front of the door. "I will not fight you," she called out in a language Elias did not understand, the harsh syllables of the orc tongue. "I will leave peacefully. There is no need for bloodshed. The leader responded in the same language, and though Elias could not understand the words, the contempt in his tone was unmistakable. Krazka's hands tightened on her weapons, her posture shifting from defensive to aggressive. What did he say? Elias demanded, moving to stand beside her on the porch despite her immediate gesture for him to stay back. He says exile is not sufficient punishment for my crimes. He says I have shamed my clan by living among humans, that I have proven I am a traitor beyond redemption. He has been sent to end my existence and restore my clan's honor. Krazka's voice was steady, but he could see fear in her eyes, not for herself but for him. He says you are a fool for protecting monster filth, and that you will die beside me for your foolishness. Rage flooded through Elias, hot and consuming. He stepped forward, raising his sword. This is my land, and you are not welcome here. The woman under my protection has done nothing worthy of death. Leave now, or face the consequences. The leader laughed, a harsh barking sound, and said something that made the other two hunters join in his mirth. Krazka translated quietly. He asks what a soft human farmer thinks he can do against trained orc warriors. I think I can make you regret underestimating me, Elias said, and charged. He knew it was probably suicidal. He knew his skills were no match for these trained killers. But he also knew he could not stand aside and watch Krazka die, could not let her face them alone. If they wanted her, they would have to go through him first. The leader met his charge with casual ease, deflecting his blade with the haft of his axe, and nearly sending Elias stumbling. But before the orc could follow up, Krazka was there, her own axe slamming into the leader's weapon with enough force to drive him back a step. She shouted something in the orc tongue, positioning herself between Elias and all three hunters. What followed was chaos. The two subordinate hunters moved to flank them while the leader engaged Krazka directly, his massive axe swinging in arcs that would have been lethal if they connected. Elias found himself facing one of the other orcs, a younger male with a sword and a cruel smile. The orc attacked with brutal efficiency, and it took everything Elias had learned from his father plus desperate instinct just to avoid being cut down in the first exchange. He heard Krazka grunt in pain and risked a glance her direction, seeing blood on her arm where the leader's axe had grazed her. Fury gave him strength, and he pressed his own attack harder, driving his opponent back toward the barn. The orc seemed surprised by his sudden aggression, and Elias managed to score a shallow cut across the warrior's shoulder, first blood to him. The cut only enraged his opponent, and the orc renewed his attack with vicious intensity. Elias felt his arms growing tired, his untrained muscles not built for this kind of sustained combat. He blocked a strike that numbed his hands, then another that drove him to one knee. The orc raised his sword for a killing blow, and Elias knew he could not block it, could not dodge in time. Then Krazka was there, moving with impossible speed, her hunting knife flashing as it took the orc in the throat. The warrior fell, clutching at the wound, and Krazka turned immediately to face the other two hunters, placing herself between them and Elias once more. "Stay down," she ordered him, her voice harsh with exertion and fear. But Elias struggled to his feet, sword still in hand despite the trembling in his arms. "I told you we face them together." The leader said something in the orc tongue. His tone changed from contemptuous to something almost respectful. Krazka responded, and a brief exchange followed. Then the leader nodded once and gestured to his remaining subordinate. Together, they retrieved the body of their fallen companion and began to withdraw. "Wait," Elias called out, confused. "What's happening?" Krazka lowered her weapon slowly, watching the retreating hunters with wary eyes. He said he sees now that I have found a new clan, that my loyalty is clear. He says that according to our laws, a warrior who has claimed a new clan through blood and battle cannot be hunted as an exile. He will report to my former chieftain that I died fighting, that his honor is restored. She turned to look at Elias, and her expression was complex, mixing relief and wonder and something that looked like fear. He called you my chieftain. He said any human who would fight orc warriors for one of our kind has earned the right to lead. Elias felt the adrenaline draining from his body, leaving him shaky and almost nauseous. So it's over. They won't come back. It is over, Krazka confirmed. Then she swayed slightly, and he saw that the wound on her arm was deeper than he had initially thought, blood running down to drip from her fingers. You're hurt, he said, moving to her immediately. Come inside, let me tend to that. They made it into the house before Krazka's legs gave out, and Elias had to half-carry her to a chair. He worked quickly, cleaning the wound with the last of his father's whiskey and binding it with clean cloth, while she sat stoic and silent, despite what had to be considerable pain. When he finally finished, his own hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the remaining bandages. You could have been killed, Krazka said quietly. You should have stayed in the barn. You should have let me handle them. And let you face 3 trained warriors alone. Not a chance. Elias sank into the chair beside her, suddenly exhausted. Besides, it worked out. We're both still alive. Because I killed one of them. Because I took a life to save yours. She looked down at her hands and he saw they were trembling too. I told myself I would not kill again. I told myself I was done with warrior ways, but when I saw him about to strike you down, I did not hesitate. Elias reached out and took one of her shaking hands in both of his. You saved my life. There's no shame in that. I am not ashamed. Krazka met his eyes and her gaze was fierce. I would kill 100 warriors to keep you safe. I would burn my clan's honor and spit on their traditions if it meant protecting you. Do you understand what I am saying, Elias Zimmerman? Do you understand what you have become to me? His heart was pounding again, but not from combat this time. Tell me, he said quietly. I want to hear you say it. I love you, Krazka said, the words rough and unpracticed but achingly sincere. I think I have loved you since the first time you insisted on eating first so that I would not starve, since you showed respect for my ways when you had no reason to do so. I love your kindness and your stubbornness and the way you see me as a person rather than a monster. I love you, and I do not know what to do with this feeling because my people do not speak of love, only of loyalty and duty. Elias felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked and hidden even from himself. Your people might not speak of love, he said, lifting his free hand to cup her face the way she had touched him weeks ago. But my people do. And I love you too, Krazka. I love your honor and your strength and the way you hum while you work. I love that you would starve rather than abandon your traditions. I love you, and I don't care that you're an orc and I'm human. I don't care what anyone else would think. I only care that you're here, that you're safe, that you're mine if you want to be. I want to be, Krazka whispered. I want to be yours in all the ways that matter, but I do not know how this works. How does one be in love? What are the human customs? Elias laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. I think we make our own customs. We've been doing that since the beginning anyway. Then as my first custom, Krazka said, leaning forward until their faces were close enough that he could feel her breath on his lips. I choose this. She kissed him, and it was awkward at first, their different physiologies requiring adjustment, her tusks something to navigate around. But they figured it out, and when they finally broke apart, both breathless, Elias felt like his world had fundamentally realigned into something better and brighter than it had been before. They sat together as the morning wore into afternoon, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in each other's presence. Krazka told him more about orc culture, about the complex web of honor and loyalty that governed every aspect of clan life. Elias told her about human customs, about courtship and marriage and the ways humans bound their lives together. So humans marry, Krazka said thoughtfully. They make vows before witnesses and are considered bonded for life. Usually before a priest and with family present, yes. Though frontier weddings are often simpler affairs, sometimes just the couple and whoever is willing to officiate. Elias paused, then added carefully, "Is that something you would want?" Marriage. Krazka was quiet for a long moment. Orcs do not marry as humans do, but we do bond. When two orcs wish to be considered mated, they present themselves to the clan leader and pledge loyalty to each other before the entire clan. The leader either accepts the bond or rejects it based on whether the match strengthens the clan. "We don't have a clan," Elias pointed out. "And I'm hardly a chieftain." "That hunter called you my chieftain. He recognized you as my leader, the one I have chosen to follow and fight beside. In orc terms, you are my clan now. This homestead is my territory, and there is no higher authority we need to answer to." Krazka turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "If you wish to bond with me in the human way, I will marry you according to your customs, and if you wish, I will pledge to you according to mine. Either way, I am yours if you will have me." Elias felt tears prick at his eyes, overwhelmed by the simple honesty of her offer. "I will have you in any way, every way. I want to spend my life with you, Krazka. I want to work this land beside you, eat meals with you, grow old with you if we're lucky enough to have that time." "Then I pledge myself to you," Krazka said formally, sliding from her chair to kneel before him in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable, until he understood she was performing some ritual important to her people. "I pledge my strength to your service, my loyalty to your leadership, my blade to your defense. I will stand beside you in all things, follow where you lead, and honor you until death claims one of us. This I swear by the blood I shed today, by the life you have given me, by the love I bear you." The words were formal, almost stilted, but the emotion behind them was raw and real. Elias slid from his own chair to kneel before her, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not good at formal pledges," he admitted, "but I promise to love you and honor you and stand beside you for as long as I live. I promise to respect your ways and learn your culture, and never ask you to be anything other than what you are. I promise to be the partner you deserve, the leader you've chosen to follow, and the man worthy of your love. This I swear." They sealed their pledges with another kiss, longer and deeper than the first. And when they finally broke apart, Elias felt fundamentally changed, as if he had crossed some threshold into a new version of his life. "We should still do a human wedding," he said after they had returned to their chairs, sitting close enough now that their knees touched. "I want it to be official in every way, but it will have to wait until spring. The circuit priest only comes through this region 3 times a year, and he won't be back until the snow melts. Then we have the winter to prepare," Krazka said, and there was a brightness to her expression that he had never seen before, something that looked like joy. They spent the remainder of the day cleaning up from the battle, burying the blood-soaked earth and repairing the damage to the yard. It was grim work, but they did it together, and that made it bearable. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Elias took his first bite as always, but this time when Krazka began to eat, she was smiling. "What?" he asked, amused by her expression. "I am eating with my chieftain," she said simply. "I am following our customs as I should, but now it is not duty. Now it is love. The food tastes better this way." Elias laughed, and the sound filled the small kitchen with warmth. Everything is better this way. Winter descended on the homestead with teeth and claws, bringing deep snows and winds that howled around the house like living things. But inside, Elias and Krazka built a life together that felt more real and solid than anything Elias had known since his parents died. They fell into routines that suited them both, working on indoor projects during the worst weather, venturing out to tend the animals and check the property when the storms broke. Krazka began teaching Elias the Orc language, patient with his clumsy pronunciation, and amused by his frequent mistakes. In return, he taught her to read and write human script, something her clan had never valued but which she took to with unexpected enthusiasm. They read together in the evenings, working through his small collection of books, and he loved watching her face as she discovered stories and ideas her people had never exposed her to. "Your people write down everything," she observed one night, looking up from a book of farming techniques. "Orcs pass knowledge through spoken word from elder to youth, but you preserve it like this so that even after the speaker is dead, the knowledge remains." "Both ways have value," Elias said diplomatically. "Oral tradition creates strong bonds between generations. But books let knowledge spread further and last longer." "Perhaps our children should learn both ways," Krazka said, then froze, looking almost frightened by her own words. Elias felt his heart skip a beat. "Our children? I should not have assumed," Krazka said quickly. "I do not know if humans and orcs can even have children together, and I should not have presumed you would want such a thing with me." "I want everything with you," Elias said firmly, setting aside his own book to take her hand. "If we can have children, I want them. If we cannot, then we will have a full life, just the two of us. Either way, I am content because I have you." Krazka squeezed his hand and he saw moisture glinting in her eyes. "I do not deserve you. That's ridiculous. If anything, I don't deserve you, but I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway." She laughed, the sound thick with emotion, and pulled him close. They spent the rest of the evening curled together before the fire, talking about potential futures, about what their life might look like in 5 years, 10 years beyond. It was the kind of conversation Elias had never thought he would have, having resigned himself to a solitary life on this frontier homestead. Now the future stretched before him bright with possibility, and all of it centered around the remarkable woman in his arms. The deep winter months were isolating, as they always were this far north. Snow drifted to the windowsills and sometimes higher, sealing them into their small homestead as effectively as a fortress. But this year, the isolation felt different. Rather than the oppressive loneliness Elias had endured in previous winters, he found himself grateful for the enforced solitude that let him focus entirely on Krazka without external interruptions. They grew closer in ways both physical and emotional, learning each other's bodies with careful exploration, figuring out together what brought pleasure despite their different physiologies. Krazka was shy at first, uncertain and afraid of her own strength, but Elias was patient, and gradually she learned to trust herself with him. Their joining was tender and passionate in equal measure, and afterward they would lie tangled together, talking until sleep claimed them. "Tell me about your clan," Elias said one night after they had made love, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. "Not the bad parts, but the good things. What do you miss?" Krazka was quiet for a long moment, and he thought she might not answer. Then she spoke, her voice distant with memory. "I miss the songs. Orcs have thousands of songs, passed down through generations, songs of battle and honor and the old times before humans came to these lands. I miss singing with the clan around the fire, everyone's voice joining together. I miss my mother, though she has been dead many years." She was a warrior too, fierce and strong, but she was kind to me in her way. She taught me to fight, but she also taught me to think, to question. I think that is why I ended up cast out. I questioned too much, thought too much about right and wrong rather than simply following orders. She sounds like a wise woman, Elias said softly. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you, I think. She always said the best warriors were those who knew when not to fight. You proved that today when you could have stayed hidden but chose to stand beside me instead. That took more courage than simply being strong. Krazka shifted to look at him in the darkness. What do you miss? About your parents, your life before I came? I miss my mother's cooking, Elias admitted with a soft laugh. I learned from her, but I never quite got the knack she had for making even simple food taste special. I miss my father's stories. He had lived an interesting life before settling here, traveled all over the province, met all kinds of people. He would tell me about his adventures, and I would dream of having my own someday. He paused, then added, I suppose I am having an adventure now, just not the kind I imagined. Are you disappointed? Not even a little bit, Elias said firmly. This is better than any adventure I could have imagined. This is real. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the howling wind outside unable to touch the warmth they had created together. Spring came late, breaking through winter's grip with reluctant slowness. The snow began to melt in early March, creating vast muddy expanses around the homestead, and Elias and Krazka began the work of preparing for the new growing season. They repaired equipment damaged by winter cold, planned out the garden and fields, and prepared seeds for planting. In late March, a traveler appeared on the road, the first person Elias had seen besides Krazka in over 4 months. He recognized the man as Brother Thomas, the circuit priest who served the scattered homesteads and small villages throughout this region. The elderly man looked exhausted from travel, his robes mud-splattered, but he smiled when he saw Elias come out to greet him. Elias Zimmerman, Brother Thomas called out. Blessings on your household. I had feared the winter might have claimed you, isolated as you are out here. I'm well, Brother Thomas, better than well, actually. Elias felt nervous anticipation flutter in his stomach. Please come inside. I have someone I want you to meet. Brother Thomas dismounted and followed Elias into the house, where Krazka was preparing tea. The priest stopped dead in his tracks when he saw her, his eyes widening. For a moment Elias feared the old man would flee or condemn them, but then Brother Thomas simply nodded slowly. I see, the priest said quietly. Well, this is certainly unexpected, but then the Lord works in mysterious ways. He moved to the table and sat, accepting the tea Krazka offered with a gracious nod. Thank you, my dear. Now, Elias, perhaps you should explain why you have an orc woman serving tea in your kitchen. Elias glanced at Krazka, drawing courage from her steady presence, and launched into the story. He explained how he found her, how she came to stay, how they had fallen in love. He described the attack by the hunters and their pledges to each other. Through it all, Brother Thomas listened without interrupting, his weathered face thoughtful. When Elias finally finished, the priest was quiet for a long moment, sipping his tea and studying both of them. Then he sighed deeply. You understand that many people would condemn this, Brother Thomas said. That there are those who would see an orc as irredeemable, incapable of love or goodness or salvation. There are even some priests who would refuse to acknowledge such a union. Elias felt his heart sink, but he lifted his chin stubbornly. If you cannot marry us, then we are already married in the ways that matter. We have pledged ourselves to each other, and no priest's blessing or lack thereof will change that. Peace, boy, I wasn't finished, Brother Thomas said with a slight smile. I said there are some who would refuse. I am not among them. I have traveled these lands for 40 years, and I have met many orcs. Some were indeed violent and cruel, but I have also known orcs who were honorable, kind, and decent. I judge individuals by their actions, not their race. He turned to Krazka. You saved this young man's life at risk to your own. You have worked beside him and built a life with him. You have shown more virtue than many humans I have met. If you truly love each other, then I will gladly perform the marriage rites and ask God's blessing on your union. Krazka looked stunned, and Elias felt tears of relief prick at his eyes. Thank you, he managed. Thank you, Brother Thomas. Thank me by being happy together, the priest said gruffly. When would you like the ceremony performed? As soon as possible, Elias said, looking at Krazka, who nodded agreement. We have waited long enough. Brother Thomas smiled. Then let us do it now while I am here. I see no reason to delay. Do you have witnesses? Traditionally, there should be at least 2. There is no one else here, Krazka said quietly. We are alone. Not entirely alone, Brother Thomas said, gesturing upward. The Lord is witness, and that is sufficient for me. Let us proceed. They stood before the fireplace, Elias and Krazka facing each other while Brother Thomas positioned himself beside them. The priest retrieved a small book from his travel bag, worn leather soft with age and use, and opened it to a marked page. Dearly beloved, Brother Thomas began, his voice taking on the formal cadence of ritual. We are gathered here in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted. Elias Zimmerman, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death parts you? I do, Elias said firmly, holding Krazka's gaze. Brother Thomas turned to Krazka. Krazka, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death parts you? I do, Krazka said, her voice strong despite the emotion shining in her eyes. Then, by the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Brother Thomas closed his book and smiled. You may kiss your bride, Elias. Elias did not need to be told twice. He pulled Krazka close and kissed her deeply, pouring every ounce of love and joy and relief he felt into that contact. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. Brother Thomas stayed with them for 2 days, resting from his travels and enjoying Krazka's cooking, which he proclaimed superior to anything he usually received on his circuit. Before he left, he wrote out a marriage certificate in careful script and signed it, pressing his official seal into the wax. Keep this safe, he told them. There may come a time when you need proof of your legal union. And Elias, Krazka, I want you to know that you have my blessing and my prayers. I hope your love serves as an example to others, proof that the divisions between peoples need not be permanent. After the priest departed, Elias and Krazka stood together on the porch, watching him disappear down the muddy road. Then they turned to each other, and Elias lifted Krazka's hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. How does it feel to be married? He asked. The same as before, Krazka said thoughtfully, and yet different, more real perhaps, more certain. I am your wife now in human law and custom. I am Krazka Zimmerman. That sounds perfect, Elias said and pulled her close. Spring unfolded into summer, and they threw themselves into the work of the growing season. Krazka proved to have a gift for animal husbandry, and under her care their small herd of chickens expanded rapidly. She also convinced Elias to acquire goats, which she said would do well on their land. And she was proven right when the animals thrived despite the challenging terrain. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over their fields, Krazka spoke suddenly. "I have something to tell you." Elias felt a flutter of concern at her serious tone. "What is it?" "I am with child," Krazka said, placing a hand over her flat stomach. "I was not certain at first, but now I am sure. We will have a baby by winter." Elias felt the world tilt sideways, joy and fear and excitement all crashing over him at once. "Are you sure? How do you know?" "Orc women know such things early. It is a sense we have, a connection to new life within us. I am certain." Krazka looked anxious now, watching his face carefully. "Are you pleased? I know we had spoken of children, but speaking and experiencing are different things." Elias laughed, the sound almost wild with happiness, and swept her into his arms despite her surprised squeak. "Pleased, Krazka, I am overjoyed. We are going to be parents. We are going to have a family." "A family," Krazka repeated, and now she was crying, though her smile was radiant. "Yes, we are going to have a family." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about how they would need to expand the house to add a proper nursery, discussing names and wondering whether the child would favor Elias or Krazka more in appearance. It was overwhelming and terrifying and absolutely wonderful. The months that followed were busy ones. Elias threw himself into home renovations, adding a room onto the house and building a sturdy crib from wood he cut and planed himself. Krazka continued working as long as she was able, though as her pregnancy progressed, Elias insisted she take on lighter tasks and rest more often. She grumbled about being treated like fragile glass, but he could tell she was secretly pleased by his attentiveness. In October, as the leaves turned gold and red, and the first cold winds began to blow, Krazka went into labor. Elias had arranged for a midwife from the nearest village to come stay with them for the last month of the pregnancy, an elderly woman named Martha, who had delivered hundreds of babies over her long career. Martha took charge of the situation with calm efficiency, banishing Elias from the bedroom and telling him to busy himself with preparing hot water and clean linens. The labor lasted through the night and into the following day, and Elias spent those hours in an agony of worry, pacing the kitchen floor and starting at every sound from the bedroom. Finally, in the late afternoon, he heard a new sound, a thin, wailing cry that made his heart leap. Martha emerged from the bedroom minutes later, looking exhausted but satisfied. "You have a healthy daughter," she announced. "Both mother and baby are doing well. You can go in now." Elias practically ran to the bedroom, where he found Krazka propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. He approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe, and Krazka smiled up at him. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Elias sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. She was tiny, perfect, with skin that was lighter than Krazka's but still carried a definite green tint. Her ears were pointed like her mother's, but smaller and more delicate, and when she yawned, he could see the tiniest hint of tusks beginning to form. Dark hair covered her head, and when she opened her eyes, they were the same amber color as Krazka's. "She is beautiful," Elias breathed, touching one impossibly small hand with his finger. The baby gripped his finger with surprising strength, and he felt his heart expand with a love so intense it was almost painful. "She is absolutely perfect." "What should we name her?" Krazka asked. We had spoken of names, but we could not decide. Elias thought about it, looking at their daughter's face. "My mother's name was Emma, and your mother was called Krazka. Could we combine them somehow? Emma for a human name, but something that honors your mother too." Krazka considered this, then nodded. In the Orc tongue, we add suffixes to names to honor ancestors. We could call her Emma Kraz, Emma who carries the spirit of Krazka. Emma Krazka Zimmerman, Elias said, trying out the full name. It sounds right. It sounds perfect, Krazka agreed. Martha stayed with them for another week, teaching them how to care for their newborn and making sure both Krazka and Emma were healthy. When the midwife finally departed, Elias and Krazka found themselves alone with their daughter, trying to navigate the overwhelming responsibility of parenthood. It was exhausting and challenging, and more rewarding than anything Elias had ever experienced. Emma was a good baby, all things considered, though she had a set of lungs that could wake them from the deepest sleep when she wanted to nurse. Watching Krazka with their daughter, seeing the fierce protectiveness and gentle care in every touch, Elias fell in love with his wife all over again. Winter came again, their second together, and this time it brought its own joys. Emma grew and thrived, learning to smile and then to laugh, her giggles the sweetest sound Elias had ever heard. They celebrated her first winter together by the fireplace, the three of them, a family complete and content. One evening, with Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib and a winter storm howling outside, Elias and Krazka sat together before the fire. Krazka leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling the solid warmth of her presence. "You remember when you first came here?" Elias asked quietly. "When you refused to eat until I did." "I remember," Krazka said. "I was so weak, so lost. I had been cast out by my clan and had no idea where I belonged or what I would become. I thought I would die alone in the wilderness. And instead, you found a stubborn farmer who insisted on respecting your customs. I found a man who saw me as a person rather than a monster, who offered me kindness when he had no reason to do so, who fought beside me and pledged his life to mine." Krazka lifted her head to look at him, and her eyes were soft with emotion. "I found my home, Elias. I found everything I needed without knowing I was searching for it." "My kind eats with the leader," Elias said softly, echoing her words from so long ago. "And you were right. That custom brought us together. Every morning when I took that first bite, I was reminded that you trusted me, that you had chosen to follow me. It made me want to be worthy of that trust." "You have always been worthy," Krazka said firmly. "From the very beginning, you were the leader I needed, the partner I dreamed of without knowing such a thing was possible." They kissed, slow and sweet, then settled back to watch the fire dance and crackle. Emma made a small sound in her sleep, and they both turned to look at her, their expressions matching in their love and pride. "I want more children," Krazka said suddenly. "Emma should have siblings, brothers and sisters to grow up with. I want this house to be full of noise and laughter and life." "Then we will have more children," Elias agreed easily. "As many as you want. We will fill this house and these fields with our family, and they will grow up knowing they are loved, that they belong, that the divisions between humans and orcs do not have to define them." "They will be strong," Krazka said with certainty. "They will have orc strength and human cleverness. They will be bridge builders, people who can move between worlds." "They will be whatever they choose to be," Elias said, "and we will love them and support them no matter what path they take." As the fire burned low and the storm raged outside, Elias thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From Krazka's desperate arrival on his land to their wedding, from the terror of the hunter's attack to the joy of Emma's birth, every step had been unexpected and challenging and absolutely worth it. He had started that fateful day over a year ago as a lonely farmer resigned to a solitary existence. Now he was a husband and father, part of a family that defied convention and expectation, but felt more right than anything he had ever known. The woman he loved, the woman who had refused to eat until he did out of respect for her customs, now sat beside him as his wife and the mother of his child. The orc who had said her kind eats with the leader had found in him not just a leader but a partner, an equal, someone to build a life with. Spring arrived once more, bringing with it renewal and growth. Emma took her first tottering steps in the garden while Elias and Krazka planted seeds for the new season. They worked together as they always had, moving in sync, anticipating each other's needs, the rhythm of their partnership as natural as breathing. One afternoon, as they took a break from field work to watch Emma chase butterflies through the grass, a figure appeared on the road approaching their homestead. Elias tensed automatically, memories of the hunters still fresh despite the time that had passed. But this traveler was human, a young woman on horseback, and as she drew closer, Elias recognized her with shock. "Sarah," he called out, hardly believing his eyes. His sister dismounted and ran toward him, and they embraced tightly. Sarah pulled back to look at him, her eyes taking in his sun-bronzed face and the happiness evident in his expression. "You look good, Elias, better than I have ever seen you." Then her gaze shifted to Krazka, who had positioned herself protectively near Emma, and Sarah's eyes widened. "So the rumors are true. I heard in the village that you had married an orc, and I had to come see for myself. Sarah, this is my wife, Krazka. Krazka, this is my sister, Sarah." Elias held his breath, uncertain how his sister would react. Sarah studied Krazka for a long moment, and Elias could see her taking in the tusks, the green skin, the obvious strength in Krazka's frame. Then Sarah smiled, warm and genuine, and stepped forward with her hand extended. "It is wonderful to meet you, Krazka. Any woman who could convince my stubborn brother to settle down must be something special." Sarah looked past Krazka to where Emma was still chasing butterflies, oblivious to the adult conversation. "And is that your daughter? She is adorable." Elias felt tension he had not realized he was carrying drain away. "Yes, that's Emma. She just turned 6 months old." Sarah spent the afternoon with them, asking questions about how they met and fell in love, expressing genuine delight at Emma's antics, and sharing news from her own life. Her husband had died unexpectedly the previous winter, leaving her a widow with no children, and she had been struggling to manage his merchant business alone. "I have been thinking about selling the business and returning to the family homestead," Sarah admitted as they sat together at dinner that evening, Elias taking his ritual first bite before everyone else ate. "I miss the simple life, the connection to the land, and I confess, I am lonely. John's family never truly accepted me, and without him, I feel like an outsider in the town." "You could stay here," Krazka said suddenly, and everyone looked at her in surprise. She continued, speaking directly to Sarah. "This house is large enough, or we could build you a small cottage on the property. You could help with the children and the work, and you would be family, not alone." Sarah looked stunned, and Elias felt a surge of love for his wife, for her generous heart that could offer welcome to his sister despite barely knowing her. He nodded enthusiastically. "Krazka is right. You are family, Sarah. You would always be welcome here. We could use the help, especially if we are going to expand the farm as we have been planning." Tears gathered in Sarah's eyes. "You would truly want me here, even though I am an outsider." "You are not an outsider," Elias said firmly. "You are my sister, and that makes you Krazka's sister too. And Emma's aunt. Please stay, Sarah. Let us be a family again." Sarah wiped at her eyes and nodded. "Then I accept. I will need a few months to settle affairs in the town, to sell the business and pack my belongings. But yes, I will come back. I will come home." After Sarah departed the next morning, promising to return by summer's end, Elias turned to Krazka. Thank you for that, for offering to let her stay. I know it means we will have less privacy, less time just the three of us. Family is not meant to be small, Krazka said simply. My clan was large, full of aunts and uncles and cousins all living together. I want that for Emma, for our future children. I want them to grow up surrounded by people who love them. Your sister is good, I can see that. She will be a blessing to us. And she was. Sarah returned in August with her belongings and her late husband's savings, which she immediately invested in expanding the farm. They built her a small but comfortable cottage at the edge of the property, close enough for easy visiting but far enough to give everyone privacy. With 3 adults to share the work, the homestead flourished as never before. Sarah proved to be wonderful with Emma, who adored her aunt and followed her everywhere when she was old enough to toddle around independently. And Sarah thrived in the open frontier air, losing the pale, strained look she had worn when she first arrived and becoming vibrant and healthy. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Krazka gave birth to a son they named Ethan 2 years after Emma was born, and then twin daughters, Iris and Ivy, 3 years after that. The house was indeed full of noise and laughter, exactly as Krazka had wished. The children grew up knowing both human and orc customs, learning to speak both languages, understanding they belonged to both worlds and neither. Emma, as the eldest, took her heritage seriously, often asking questions about orc culture and human traditions with equal curiosity. She had Krazka's strength and Elias's thoughtful nature, and by the time she was 10 years old, she was already helping manage the younger children with a maturity beyond her years. Ethan was quieter than his sister, preferring books and learning to physical activity, though he had inherited enough of his mother's strength that he could work the fields when needed. The twins were whirlwinds of energy and mischief, keeping everyone on their toes with their elaborate games and schemes. Sarah never remarried, content with her role as aunt and partner in running the farm. She and Krazka developed a deep friendship, and Elias often came upon them talking together in the garden or kitchen, heads bent close in conversation and laughter. One spring morning, when Emma was 12 and the other children were splashing in the creek that ran through their property, Elias and Krazka stood together at the edge of their expanded fields, looking out over everything they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Elias asked quietly. "Leaving your clan, giving up your old life?" Krazka turned to look at him, and her expression was peaceful, content in a way he never saw in those early desperate days. "How could I regret the path that led me to you, to our children, to this life we have created?" She gestured at the fields, the house, the happy shouts of children playing. "I lost one clan, yes, but I found a better one. I found a family built on love rather than obligation, on choice rather than blood ties alone." "My kind eats with the leader," Elias said softly, remembering. "And I found a leader worth following," Krazka replied, taking his hand. "More than that, I found a partner worth building a life with. I found my home, Elias, and it was worth every hardship, every loss, every moment of fear and uncertainty to get here." Elias pulled her close, kissing her forehead tenderly. They stood like that for a long moment, watching their children play, listening to Sarah singing in the garden, feeling the sun warm on their faces and the solid earth beneath their feet. He thought about that day so many years ago when he had found a desperate orc woman collapsed in his field. He thought about the choice he had made to help her, to invite her into his home, to respect her customs even when he did not fully understand them. That single choice had transformed his entire life, had taken him from loneliness to love, from isolation to family, from surviving to truly living. Emma called out for them to come watch her show her siblings how to skip stones across the creek, and Elias and Krazka walked hand in hand down to join their children. As they settled on the creek bank, Ethan leaning against his mother and the twins climbing into Elias's lap, Emma demonstrated her technique with the serious focus she brought to everything she did. "When I grow up," Emma announced after successfully skipping a stone 4 times, "I want to travel. I want to visit both human towns and orc clans. I want to show people that we can all live together, that being different does not mean being enemies." "That is a worthy goal," Krazka said, pride evident in her voice. "The world needs bridge builders, people willing to cross divides." "But you will always come home, yes?" Elias asked, only half joking. "Your mother and I would miss you terribly." Emma grinned at him, her small tusk showing. "Of course I will always come home. This is where I belong. But that does not mean I cannot venture out into the world too. You taught me that, both of you. You showed me that home is not about staying in one place forever. It is about having people who love you, who will welcome you back no matter how far you roam." "When did you get so wise?" Elias asked, ruffling her dark hair affectionately. "I learned from the best," Emma said simply, and Elias felt his heart swell with love for his remarkable daughter, for all his children, for the life he and Krazka had created together. As the afternoon wore on into evening, they made their way back to the house together, the children running ahead while Elias and Krazka followed more slowly. Sarah had dinner waiting, a feast of fresh bread and roasted chicken and vegetables from the garden, and they all gathered around the expanded table that now seated 7 comfortably. Elias sat at the head of the table as always, and without needing to think about it, he served himself first, taking that ritual first bite that had become such an integral part of their family life. Then everyone else began to eat, conversation flowing easily, laughter punctuating stories of the day's events. Looking around at his family, at the wife who had taught him about honor and tradition, at the children who represented the best of both their heritages, at his sister who had found a new home with them, Elias felt complete. He had everything he had ever wanted and more than he had ever dared to dream. Krazka met his eyes across the table and smiled, a private smile just for him that held all the love and partnership they had built over the years. He smiled back, and in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The orc woman who had once refused to eat until the leader had become his wife, his partner, the mother of his children, and the love of his life. And every day, with every meal, with every shared moment of work or joy or simple contentment, he was grateful for the customs that had brought them together, and the love that had allowed them to build something extraordinary. Their story had begun with a simple act of respect, with understanding that different customs held meaning and deserved to be honored. It had grown through shared struggle and mutual trust, through choosing each other day after day, even when the world said their love was impossible. And it would continue into the future, through their children and their children's children, a legacy of love that crossed boundaries and built bridges where others saw only walls. As the evening deepened and the candles flickered on the table, Elias raised his cup in a toast. "To family," he said simply. "To family," everyone echoed, and they drank together, bound by love and choice and the unbreakable bonds they had forged together. The meal continued late into the evening, and eventually the younger children were put to bed while Emma stayed up a bit longer, her privilege as the eldest. When she finally yawned and headed to her room, Elias and Krazka found themselves alone on the porch once more, the same porch where they had shared so many important moments over the years. "I love you," Elias said, pulling Krazka close. "I will never stop loving you." "And I love you," Krazka replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Until death and beyond, I am yours and you are mine." They stood together under the stars, the night peaceful around them, the house behind them full of sleeping children and all the warmth of home. And in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be, exactly as it was always meant to be. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Their journey had started with a cultural tradition about leaders and followers, but it had become something far greater than that. It had become a story about love transcending boundaries, about building family from choice rather than blood, about creating a future where differences were celebrated rather than feared. And as they stood together on that porch, Elias and Krazka knew that their story would continue, that the home they had built and the family they had created would endure, a testament to the power of respect and understanding and love to overcome any obstacle. The stars wheeled overhead, the seasons would continue their eternal cycle, and through it all they would stand together, leader and follower, husband and wife, two hearts beating as one, forever bound by the customs that had brought them together and the love that kept them strong.